And joining me now is David Wojcik, the CEO of the Mississauga Board of Trade. Welcome to Peel News Talk, David. Much appreciate this.
Thanks, Mark. Good to be with you.
Talk a little bit about the budget because your organization has recently put out a notice, a release saying, look, Premier Wynne dropped the small business tax. Why is it such a big deal for your organization?
Well, the interesting thing about the provincial budget is many of the initiatives that the provincial government wants to institute do happen quite a bit in the future. So it, uh, it is very much interesting to see how these initiatives will benefit anyone in the short term. So the things that we are really concerned about is harmonization on a couple of items with the federal government. It's $100 million of extra cost to business under the EHT, removing the removing the small business deduction on passive income, which can create between these two measures, it could create up to $500 million worth of extra tax for businesses. So that's concerning for
Of
us.
course, the election is, I guess, a few months away, a couple of months away, really. Uh,
Mhm.
and the Wynne government came out with a budget which included running up a deficit again for years to come. And it was a budget that clearly was intended to please their base. And it included a lot more social spending. And, clearly they were hoping that this would move the needle. The party appears to have moved left in terms of its political tract away from fiscal restraint and towards just more spending on everything, including, of course, the big daycare promise. And yet there are indications that it has failed, in fact, to boost their fortunes. What's your take on how the budget has been received in general, not only by your organization, but beyond that with the general public heading into this all important provincial election day?
Mhm. Well, I think just in the general polls, if you see that this budget, which was all about social spending and a lot of programs that I imagine any government would hope that would appeal to their base. The polls have suggested that it has clearly not done the job. That they haven't seen the movement on the numbers that I'm sure that they had hoped to see.
I guess it didn't help Bob Delaney's comments at the breakfast. Um, we did get an apology, of course, by Mr. Delaney, a kind of retraction of sorts. But you don't get the sense, at least I don't, that they're really that sorry about what their feelings are about fiscal restraint in the province of Ontario. I mean, this is clearly a party, a government that believes they can run up deficits ad nauseum forever. And as long as you've got a certain percentage, a lowering percentage of the net debt to GDP, and I realize it's a kind of a technical term, but it's basically just the level of debt as a portion of the gross domestic product of the province. That as long as that's manageable, but as long as you have a ballooning debt, of course, that's still going to be bad news for business in general.
Well, first of all, Bob's a passionate guy, and he, he really he believes in his party. He believes in the people of Mississauga, and we've had a lot of very very good conversations with MPP Delaney. So I wouldn't get too critical about Bob for an off the cuff comment that he may have made. As I say, he's a very, very passionate person, and really believes that he's doing the best job that he can for his constituents. With respect to GDP and debt to GDP, uh, the numbers are correct. I mean, it does say that the numbers do say that we can support the debt. Uh, but you're absolutely right when it comes to how much debt can you possibly support and when should you be doing it. Normally, governments go into deficit spending when we are heading into a recession in order to stimulate economy and stimulate infrastructure. I will say that we were encouraged to see infrastructure spending in the provincial budget that the government had proposed. So infrastructure spending is always good for business. That props things up. But there is a lot of spending there that we do question. The is this the right time to be doing that? Because as you pointed out, once we start going into that recession, and you do need that extra money, and if interest rates do start to move upward, then we could see a budget like the last one really put the province in a very, very tough position.
We talked a little bit about the polls, David, and I realized that politically speaking, you're on the fence, and but clearly you've got to be monitoring anytime you go into any provincial election. You've got to be keeping an eye on what the possibilities are, and
Mm-hmm.
you've got to realize that in case there's a change, then you've got to resonate with a whole new set of policies. Do you do that sort of? Are you doing that sort of? Is that process going on now, without going too far in the political side of things? But are you bracing for a possible change in Ontario, and what that might mean for the business community?
I think that everyone's doing that. If you're connected to the political scene at all, of course, there's a lot of rumors being fueled by caffeine and alcohol about who who may be doing what, where, who are potential cabinet ministers in the other two parties. Should there be a change in government, who would be potential ministers in the incumbent government? Should they be successful? Would there be a cabinet shuffle? Would things move around? If it's a minority government, then do the leaders change seats as well? I mean, there's really a lot of things, a lot of moving parts that are going on. And so for us, yes, I mean, we always do. We always have those discussions about who do we think will take the seats should there be a change in government, and and also not just who will take the cabinet minister positions, but who will take the critic positions in opposing governments. So it's for policy wonks, for people that are committed to the political process and find it interesting. It's a pretty exciting time just to try and imagine and suppose and guess at who might take the seats.
And I guess you can't resist kind of playing a little bit of that game, the what if game, right? I mean,
Well, absolutely, and there's a lot of what ifs. I know a lot of chambers are also looking at the what ifs because of the upcoming municipal election. So what if there's a change in seats at the provincial level? Who out of the provincial level would then seek election at the municipal level on October the 22nd? So this election on June 7th has far-reaching repercussions far beyond the June 7th election, but into the municipal election coming up as well.
and I'm not going to ask you to speculate too much because I know you're probably not going to go there. But I guess we're all going to play that game right up until election day, and then beyond that, what does the next government do? If it's a Ford government, who gets what? If it's a Wynne government, who goes? I mean, the Wynne government would be have already lost a significant number of experienced ministers just by virtue of the people who are not going to be running this time around. So there's a tremendous loss of experience. I would think when you're looking at people like Hoskins and Duguid and all these other people, I think there's something like 11 of the MPPs slash ministers who are not going to be running next time.
Right, and that that could be a significant issue, whether the liberals are successful or not successful. That loss of that experience can be devastating to a party. With respect to Doug Ford's government, he's just been elected leader, so who he might appoint, should he be successful, who he might appoint as a minister is kind of anybody's guess right now, because he's a different person than a different person, and would probably have affinity to different people than Patrick Brown did. And the critics that are there right now are the Patrick Brown critics. They're not the Doug Ford critics, and there wouldn't be the Christine Elliott critics, and so the whole issue of who would be a critic if they're not successful, and who would be a minister if they are successful. It is quite an interesting. It's a very, very interesting conversation. Now we have an open invitation to all of the leaders of the parties. We have an open invitation to Premier Wynne, Doug Ford, the leader of the opposition, Andrea Horwath, the leader of the NDP. All of the leaders have an open invitation to come and speak to the Mississauga Board of Trade at any time.
Well, I look forward to the next episode of MBOT TV.
It's going to be exciting, Mark. I guarantee it.
Thanks again for being interviewed by Peel Talk. Much appreciated.
My pleasure. Thanks, Mark.
Bye-bye.